Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. Was it good? Okay, great. Then we can continue. Our fourth lecturer, Robert Basic, is here to break the ice after lunch and wake you up a little bit. So please welcome him with a great applause for a start, please. Name of his lecture is introDDDuction.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Let's. Which one? This one. Drag it over. There we go. Full screen. Excellent. Speaker notes. Excellent. Okay, hello, welcome. Welcome to this introductory talk about domain-driven design. And even though if you are experienced with domain-driven design or junior programmer, senior programmer, and you have no idea what domain-driven design is, I hope everyone will learn something today and that you will get something out of this talk, because I'm honestly really excited about this subject. So. Hello, my name is Robert, and I've been a PHP programmer and software consultant for the past 10 years. And during this entire decade in this industry, I realized I really like working with legacy applications. And I love everything about legacy applications. I like upgrading PHP versions, framework libraries, writing tests, writing documentation, fixing bugs, adding features, figuring out why do certain things work the way they do. So pretty much everything about legacy applications, and also it's good money. Other thing I like to do is contribute to open source a lot, because open source contributed a lot to my career. So I think it's only fair to give a little back. Now, when people say legacy application, I know that programmers usually run for cover or start screaming, rewrite, rewrite. Like, they don't want to work on legacy applications. They only want to work on really new, shiny code. And I don't understand why. Because legacy applications are applications that are living, breathing thing for the past 6 months, a year, 6 years, or even more than that. And there's a lot of knowledge hidden in these legacy applications. They're full of good things. Of course, they are full of bad things, bad code, and that's why we run away from them. But they are full of this just knowledge about both the code, the application, and the business that our applications should support. And our applications should support the businesses. That's why we hired to write software. Because, you don't go about and write software and then make up a business as you go. Or you do, but then you do startups. But, in real business, you support a business. You help them grow. You help them make money. If they make money, you make money. And during these 10 years in this industry, I started wondering, what's the problem? Why? We're smart people. We are engineers. We know the best practices. We know the design patterns. We write tests. Except if you're Miro, apparently. Sorry, Miro, I had to use that. That was totally unplanned, but so good. Anyway, why is it happening? Why do we write shitty software when we know how to write good software? And I was thinking about this a lot and a lot and a lot. And what I realized, what I believe that is happening, is that the problem is communication, or to put it better, the lack of communication or a process of completely broken communication. And when I say like when someone says communication, the thing that comes to mind is like, he's just talking like I'm doing right now. But there's so much more to communication than just talking. Communication is a process of, okay, I have an idea in my head. You don't know it, but I do. Now I have to make it an understandable idea even for myself. Then I have to use words from the same language that you and I can both understand and assemble a sentence. Say it out loud, hope that there is no obstacle between me and you hearing that sentence I just said. You have to know that language I used. You have to know all the words that I used, and then be able to, decipher that sentence. And then I hope that both of us have the exactly same idea at the end of, my sentence. And there's so much things that can go wrong in this. And communication is a two-way street. It's not enough to talk. You have to listen, and you have to hear. You have to really understand people. And when I started out this industry, I really liked it because I'm not really a people person. This whole stage presence makes me scared. And when I started out, like, oh yeah, programming is good. I can put on my headphones, blast loud music, just hack on code, and money will magically appear in my bank account. The world is a perfect place. Except it's not, and that's a really wrong attitude to have, just like, you don't have to talk to people. That's a wrong attitude to have. Like, programming is all about communication. That's what I honestly believe. Programming is communication. So we need to be really good at communicating with other people. Now, completely unrelated to all this thing about communication, about a year or so ago, I decided I want to learn domain-driven design. Now, I've heard about domain-driven design even before that. And the first time was in Zagreb, 2013. Robert Shorn was giving a talk on domain-driven design. And that entire presentation just whoosh over my head. I didn't understand a single thing. And I thought, okay, this is some shiny new thing. It keeps appearing on conferences, and almost every PHP conference has a talk or a workshop that at least touches the subject of domain-driven design. So I got interested, like, what's going on? So last year I had a bit of an extra time on my hands, so I decided I want to learn domain-driven design. And the first thing I learned, it's not a shiny new thing. Like, the first book that talks about domain-driven design was written in 2003 and published in 2004 by Eric Evans. It's the so-called Blue Book, or Domain-Driven Design, Tackling the Complexity in the Heart of Software. And 2004 I started learning programming in 2005. So the subject of domain-driven design is older than my entire programming career. It's not a new thing. It's an ancient thing in internet years. Okay. So, as pretty much everyone else, the first thing I started learning about domain-driven design is this thing, so the one part of domain-driven design, which is called tactical domain-driven design. And that's the part that deals with entities and value objects and aggregates and repositories, factory services, domain events, all those things that we can call code. And actually in the Blue Book, Eric Evans calls it the building blocks of domain-driven design. And I started learning them from code examples, blog articles, seeing what people present about at conferences, and then trying them out in pet projects. And after a while, I even bought the blue book, hard copy, started reading it, and I was really happy when I started reading it because it also started with tactical DDD, and it pretty much told me what I already knew. I was happy about it. Okay, so these people who wrote these blog posts and talk about this thing at conferences, they know what they're talking about. It's the same as in the original book. And of course, there were a place or two where I lacked some knowledge. The book helped me fill those holes, and all was good. But once I went past those first couple of chapters that talk about tactical DDD, I had a really hard time understanding what I'm reading. It was so difficult to, I read a chapter, and I read it again, and I read it again, and I read it again, and then I put the book back on the shelf. I just quit, no. I didn't give up on DDD, I gave up on reading that book. So in those 2-3 months, I continued, trying to get as much as knowledge about the tactical part, so experimented further with pet projects and so on. And tactical DDD is relatively easy to understand and to learn. It's not easy. It's relatively easy to this other part of domain-driven design, which is called strategic DDD. And it's relatively easy because for tactical DDD, you have code. And we are programmers. We read code, we write code, we live code. Everything we do with code. So, and this strategic part is wishy-washy. It sounds like someone is peddling you a bunch of rocks you don't need, my experience was that my programmer brain couldn't really understand these dry words I was reading in this book. And so I tried to different things with pet projects. So I would come across a problem, ask someone, I decided I would ask someone who is already an established domain-driven design expert, help me out. Have you worked on this problem? Yes. What's the solution? It depends. What? What do you mean it depends? You've solved it. Let me just copy-paste it. I'm done. Turns out that domain-driven design, you write software to support a business. And turns out there are no two businesses exactly the same in the world. Two companies might be doing business in the same industry, even in the same niche, but they have their own vision of the world. They have their own view of the problem. So they are solving those problems using solutions that fit their view of the world. So even if two businesses are doing solving the same problem, they're solving it in a completely different ways. So it means that what worked for one person in DDD does not necessarily apply for a different person. And another thing I realized, what makes DDD hard to learn, is that domain-driven design is a process. It's a long living process, and it lives as long as your software project lives. And when someone tries to teach you or what they learn during that process, at best they can give you the start, the middle, and it's not even the end, it's the current state of things. Because the project, he wrote that book in 2004, since then that project evolved or died. And between these start, middle, current, there are hundreds and hundreds of tiny little things they tried out, hundreds of different ways they failed and succeeded. And it's not possible for them to give you all that knowledge in a book, in a blog post, in a conference talk. So a lot of those experiments, it's pretty much up to you to figure out. And honestly, so I've been programming for 10 years professionally. And I haven't done as much hard thinking about our craft as I have been in the past 1 year as I started learning DDD. Because it's a completely different way of thinking about software. And regardless of what DDD experts tell you, it's not only for complex domains. So you don't have to be a banking business, or something like that. You don't have to work on worldwide logistics to be able to apply DDD. I honestly believe that everyone who learns DDD will come out as a better programmer on the other end. Okay, I probably said DDD 2,000 times by now, but what is domain-driven design? What does it mean? It's pretty much an approach to software development. And I sort of think of it as almost a philosophy, because it completely, at least in my case, changes how I view software and how I approach writing it. And it gives us means and tools and processes to build better software. So the word domain in domain-driven design, that domain represents the problem space of the business that we are helping out. Because we are helping out a business, right? And so that's the domain. And just because there's the word design in domain-driven design, it doesn't mean that there is okay, now we are design phase, that's done, now let's write software. No, that stops with domain-driven design. Because the software you write, it needs to live as long as the business lives. And it needs to be close together. So you are designing that software as long as the business lives. And together with designing, you're also writing that software. And of course, domain-driven design is not a silver bullet. It won't magically make all your problems go away. And it also is not a framework or a library that you can install in your projects, nor is it a piece of code example you can copy-paste from Stack Overflow. It's a completely new view, in my opinion, completely new view of how you write software. So the first thing we do when we either start a new software project or want to apply DDD to an existing software project is we team up with these so-called domain experts. Now, that might sound scary because, experts, but these are just regular people like you and I. It's just that they have knowledge about the business they work in, about the industry they work in, and about the problems they encounter on daily business and the solutions that they need for those problems. And we use them, tough word, we use them for gathering knowledge from them. Like, we are software experts. We are not banking experts. We are not shipping experts. They are. So if you want to write a software for a bank, you have to go to a banker and, okay, what does a bank do? Right? You cannot write software for a bank any other way. And we have to accept that there is no more us versus them. That also stops here. We are one team. They also want that company to succeed, and we want that company to succeed. And it will be easier for that company to succeed if we work together. And everyone must accept this, from top brass to the lowest code monkey. And we always have to have access to these domain experts, as long as the software lives or as long as the company lives. There always has to, the particular person might change, they might quit, they might go on a sick leave or something, but we always have to have access to a domain expert. So we can ask them about this domain. Now, when we agreed, okay, we have a domain expert, one or several, we talk to them, we collaborate with them, we communicate with them to identify what is the core problem, the core domain of that business. Because every business out there exists for one reason or several really similar reasons. They are working on solving one problem. There might be additional problems they have to solve so that they be able to solve that main problem. But at the core of things, they have one problem, one domain that they're solving. And that core domain is the reason why we hired, because they want to solve that problem using software. And we are the software experts, we're gonna write that software for them. And that, also that core domain gives the company the competitive advantage over their, well, competitors. And I said there are like business deals with other problems as well. Take, for example, a car mechanic. Why does someone start a car mechanic business? They want to fix cars, right? But they also have to deal with hiring good mechanics. They have to deal with ordering spare parts, making sure their tools are good. They have to pay taxes. They have to pay out their mechanics. They have to pay out the spare parts. So their core domain is fixing cars. But the subdomains are all these little things that they have to deal with, but it's not the reason why they created that company in the first place. And the thing we have to do for these subdomains is we have to do everything we can to not write software for those subdomains. Like, yes, we are programmers, we're hired to write software, but for subdomains, try your best not to write a single line of code for subdomains. Like a car mechanic, why would you write an accounting software for them? It's their subdomain. No, just take a stack of papers, take it to an accountant, deal with it. Like taxes, that's your job. Or maybe use an existing software for subdomains. You're making an online web store, and the management want to see graphs, you know, year over year, daily sales, monthly sales, quarterly sales, bar charts, pie charts, these charts, that charts. You want charts? Fine. Export to CSV, load it up in Excel, draw your charts. Use an existing software. It's a problem. It's a solved problem. Don't solve it again. You're hired to write them a secure and fast online web store. You're not hired to draw them graphs. It's not the core domain. But even if you do end up writing software for subdomains, you can skimp on it, you know. It doesn't have to be perfect. The core domain has to be perfect, or as close as possible. Subdomain, it's passable. Once we understand what are the problems that we are trying to solve, then we, again, together with the domain experts, we start creating models, domain models. And these models are not the models that we are used to. They don't carry data from the user interface to the database and back. They help us easily understand the problem that we are trying to solve. It doesn't have to be in code. We can represent those models in code using the building blocks from tactical DDD. And eventually the computer will run that code and solve the problems for us. But what is a model? In a real world, take for example a car crash test dummy, it would be stupid, expensive probably, and really painful to put in there a real person, right? It would hurt a lot. So they came up with these test dummies that are full of sensors, and then put them in a car, and whoosh, car goes 60 kilometers per hour into a brick wall. And the car manufacturers and car safety people, they learn from this data. And that dummy is a model of a person. And that model doesn't know how to read, or to write, or to drive. It doesn't have flesh and bone. So it's not a 100% perfect model of us, humans. But it is useful for that one use case. How safe is that car? Nothing more, nothing less. So likewise, the models that we create for our software don't have to be 100% exactly the same as the real thing. If you make a thing that is 100% the same as the real thing, bravo, you just made a new real thing. You didn't make a model of it. So these models, they have to be useful for their use cases. Nothing more, nothing less. And they also document and gather all the knowledge that we got from the domain experts. We use these domain models as sort of a repository, like a place to store all that knowledge. And these domain models can be expressed in multiple ways. Documents, like Word document, or code, or diagrams, images, whatever. Because we're writing software, most often we express them as code. Now, because we talk to these domain experts, and together with them, we create these models. It would be like if I'm talking to you right now, I'm trying to explain to you a concept. It would be really silly of me to use words that are different from the concept that I'm actually trying to explain. Like, if a domain expert says, okay, we have a client and a customer and a lead and an agent and an editor and an author, why in the world are we writing a user God model with Boolean flags and enums and so this is false, this is true, so this must be an editor, but if this is 29, then it's an author. But just create a model of a client and call it a client, class customer, not just class user and then pass in flags. So use the same language as the domain experts use, and use it everywhere. Use it in your words, documents, emails, chats, Jira tickets, code, diagrams, everywhere. Because it eases the communication between us and them, between the team. And in 2 years, if you see class client, oh yeah, that's a client, right? Or a customer. But if you see class user in a constructor, oh, it takes like 3 Boolean flags, and then it makes the code crappy. It makes a really bad legacy code. But if you come to a legacy application, class customer, it's a customer. You don't have to think about it. So this language that we use and share with the domain experts, that's what we call in domain-driven design the ubiquitous language. Now that's a pretty difficult word, and I had to look it up in the dictionary, and it means all-encompassing or ever-present. And pretty much what it means, yes, we use it everywhere, from emails and chats and code and documentation. Just use the same words everywhere. And if the domain expert says, for example, schedule a meeting with a customer, then make your method names schedule a meeting, not make appointment. But talk with the domain experts. Oh, is maybe make an appointment a more appropriate term for this? No? Yes? Yeah, yes, it is. Then you both change your language. You change the method name. You change the diagrams. You change the Jira tickets. And they also change the words that they are using. Because we designed this ubiquitous language together so that it better supports the software and in turn better supports the business. Now, if I say to you, kiwi is nice, what's the image in your head? I'm guessing it's the little green fruit, all hairy. What's your image, Luca? Person from New Zealand. Okay. My image is my friend's parrot. His name is Kiwi. So, any language needs a context. I can't, human language, not ubiquitous language from domain-driven design. Any language, when we talk, we need context around it. Otherwise, people will misunderstand us. So to that effect, in domain-driven design, there are we build up boundaries around our ubiquitous language. And we call them bounded contexts. And it's a made-up thing. It's not a real thing. It's made up for the purpose of domain-driven design. But its purpose is to, if we define, okay, this is the language we use it only in this context. Because a certain term might have a different meaning in a different context. Which takes me back to a project I worked on for 4.5 years. And it was dealing with online sales. And every product had like 3 or 4 different prices and 3 or 4 different costs. And they were not the same thing if that product appeared on a purchase order or if it would appear on an order. So that's like orders, purchase orders, 3. A lot of combinations and a lot of meaning to the term price or cost. And it would be completely, those prices and costs would be completely different, have different calculations depending were they on a purchase order or on an order. And this was the problem I stuck while reading the DDD book, Bounded Context. I just couldn't understand it at all. So I put the book back on the shelf, and it never left my mind really, so I kept thinking about it. And at one point I had this aha moment. I remembered this project and the problem I had with the different prices and costs and not being able to understand when I'm supposed to use one price or the other price or the cost or this cost, that cost. So it's like, oh, so it was depending, was it on a purchase order or an order? So my bounded contexts there were purchase order and order. And I wrote a blog post on this. So how I try to explain it there, you have a book, a physical book, right? And it has a price. But what is a price of a book? If you ask a book publisher, what's their price of a book? And what makes up their price of the book? They will say, oh, we have to pay out the author, the editors, the paper, the printing, the designing, the binding, the gluing, what else is there in publishing? Well, publishing, marketing. That's a book it's like price of the book, as the book publisher sees it. But if you ask a bookseller, what's their price of the book? They will say, oh, well, the cost I pay to the book publisher and, pay for the store clerk, rent for the store, electricity for the store, bills for the store, my profit margin, book price at the end. Again, two completely different things, but are using the same term. So if we say, okay, book price, in the book publisher context, we know what to expect there. We expect the cost of the paper in that price. But if we say book price in the context of book seller, then we expect, the cost of store clerk's paycheck. We don't expect there to see the cost of the paper itself. It was already in the cost of buying the book from the book publisher. So we have to have these bounded contexts to keep these terms from our language, from these different languages mixing and muddying the waters. Because if we let them cross these boundaries, then that makes communication more difficult. You won't understand what I'm saying. You will have a completely different, expectation in your head. So it's really important for these bounded contexts to really separate our ubiquitous languages. And if the core domains and the subdomains, they represent sort of the problem space, the universe of the problem of that business. The bounded context with its ubiquitous language sort of represents the solution space. Like, what solution did we create for that problem? So coming from that, we should always aim to have one bounded context with one ubiquitous language per one core domain or subdomain. That's our ideal world. Of course, the world is not a perfect place. So there will be cases when one bounded context spans multiple subdomains or core domains, or that one subdomain or one core domain has multiple bounded contexts with their ubiquitous languages. But even if we come across that kind of situation, we should probably consider it as a design smell, and that we should maybe try and find a way back to that one-to-one mapping. Maybe we created this subdomain too big. Maybe we misunderstood the problem. Maybe that problem is actually two smaller problems. And then we can create two additional subdomains and then two separate bounded contexts, two new ubiquitous languages, and so on. And these things happen. These things happen 3 years down the line. Like, maybe the business decided we're going to pivot. You know, startup, they do pivots all the time. So suddenly you're working on a completely new problem. And when you do work on a completely new problem, don't try to reuse the existing solution. Like the code you already wrote, the models you already created. Yes, you put effort in that, and money, and time. But it's not solving the wrong problem, but because the problem was correct at one point in time. But it's just now solving a different problem. You went from A to B, write a new solution. Maybe you can reuse some things, but don't just try to hack on things and you try to squeeze it in, because again, you muddy the idea behind that code. You muddy the language of that code. And again, down the line, the maintenance costs for that legacy application will go through the roof. Okay, so what does domain-driven design and communication have in common? Why this talk? Because I honestly believe if we follow the principles of domain-driven design, we can improve our communication. We can become better communicators, better talkers, better listeners. And with that, we can write better software. And software that helps those businesses in a much better and nicer way. And it will be much easier and much more joyful to work on those applications. And maybe the term legacy application won't become a bad word in our industry anymore. Now, I haven't done any domain-driven design in a professional capacity. I was never paid to do domain-driven design on a project. Maybe this entire talk is just my wishful thinking, just rubbish, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. I don't know, but I honestly believe in this. And practically believe in that so much that pretty much going forward, I'm sort of driving my personal career, my professional career, in the way of domain-driven design. Will it work? Will it not? I have no idea, but I will find out and I will try. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert, for this lecture.
Thank you.
I have to ask you something. It's important to us here in PHP Serbia. At this conference, we have evaluation pool. And it means to us, so I'm asking you, please take some time to give us your feedback. Stop at the pool table and let us know what you think about this conference. At this moment, I can thank you once again for this lecture, and I can tell you that now starts 30 minutes, it's a bit more, 30 minutes pause. It's like a break for coffee and refreshments, and I'll see you here at 4 o'clock sharp. Thank you so much.
Also, if anyone has questions, we can either do them now or later. You can
if you
find
have
me.
questions, you can do it now. Do you have any questions for Robert? Okay, here's one. Okay.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for the great talk. It's been very informative. What do you think about how hard actually it is to differentiate between core domain and subdomain at some times? Because I can imagine that there could be some kind of subdomain creep, like feature creep, you know.
Yeah, it's possible, but that's why you talk with the domain experts. They know what they do. And it can happen that you do it wrong. I mean, in these pet projects I created, I didn't, I tried to write software for the problems I come up in my everyday life. So like making a hair appointment and, stuff like that, making a more complex to-do list. So for that hair appointment example, I ended up making the user registration a core problem. It's not. It's a subdomain. Just use, I don't know, FOSS user res bundle. And that problem is solved. The core problem is scheduling appointments and making sure that there are no overlapping appointments. That's the core problem in a software that deals with scheduling. User registration, that's a solved problem. So it can happen. When I realized that, oh, I fucked it up, cut this piece out, focus only on this, install a composer library for this other part, connect the two. I mean, it sounds now like just connect the two. There's more things to that. But that's also you can, from tactical part, I intentionally didn't want to talk about tactical DDD because everyone here can figure that thing out. Because I figured it out. You can figure it out as well. But this was hard to understand. So I'm just trying to give, my point of view.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
More question? Yeah.
How do you get to domain experts? DDD is something that's not really, didn't really catch up yet in the regular development.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And businesses are are back even more. So when you get hired by a business to make a software or something, it's usually because business decides that they want to include computers in that, so they'll be faster, something like that. But the domain experts are usually shitting their pants because they know they'll lose their jobs once everything switches to computers. So what's a good way to approach somebody who knows everything about the domain and make him be cooperative and all of that?
I guess, as Erin said today in her keynote, it comes down to empathy, because I think she named the person in her example Natalie. That Natalie was a domain expert for the sitemap. And she was scared in her example from the top brass, from the management. But then Erin approached her in a friendly manner, with empathy, and they solved the problems together. Okay, I know it's not the questions you ask, but it's a people's problem. Yeah. You have to solve that with people hacks, I guess. So, and on that project I worked for that online sales stuff, I was just honestly, because I was programming that. I was programming the algorithms that the other people, the business people, came up with. Okay, I see a term GMROI. No idea what that is. Wikipedia. Okay. Next time they mention that, oh, it's that when the charts and stuff and money comes out the other end. Yeah, that's right. So I had to put in a little effort, but the next time they were more inclusive towards me, and eventually I learned quite a lot about their business side of things and help them grow and help them make a lot of money. So it's a people's problem, basically. Thank you. Any other questions?
Da li ima još pitanja? Any other questions? Okay.
There's
Možeš molim te da dodaš gospodinu u sredini? Can you raise your hand, please? Okay.
Nice talk. Thank you for
Thank you for saying that. Means a lot.
What if, let's say you're in a startup and
Okay.
you have access to your business people, but you kind of feel that they're not really domain experts in their area. For example, if you feel that they have a lot to learn about their job, what they're doing.
So if I understood the question correctly, what if there is no domain expert? Or if,
Yes.
well, learn it together, I guess, because in the end you will have to learn it as well so that you can come up with good solutions. So again, from an empathy, people, problem point of view, I would again approach it with, let's do this together, because we're in this startup, we work crazy hours, we take only equity, we don't have paychecks, but we have to succeed, so let's succeed together. So again, if that means that we both have to learn how to, I don't know, taxes work, because we are an accounting startup, then we'll both figure out how taxes work.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Next question. Are there any more questions? Okay.
Sorry, you were mentioning when you have, for example, client, when you have author, create a separate class for each one of them.
Yeah, different model.
Different model. Just like junior questions. Sorry.
No, there are no stupid questions. Feel free to ask.
For the optimization and performance issues, do you suggest inheriting something, or because something will repeat?
Yes, but you have to be really clear on the naming, because if you, for example, if you create a base class for those clients and customers because they both have a first and a last name, and you have to be really careful about naming things, because if you again name the base class, for example, user, as Andrew said last year, only drug dealers have users. So, maybe it's not a user, it's a persona. And actually, this your question, that's a frequent question in the world of domain-driven design. Like, what do I do with this? I have to extend. And then, you think about it. And what I said, that I spent a lot of time this past year thinking about things, it was mostly down to naming things. Because in these pet projects, I don't have an access to domain experts. Like, this was all me alone in my free time. So I also had the same problem you just asked. Like, how do I share fields between models?
Yeah.
And then, you just have to think really good and really hard about naming so that it makes sense down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next question. No more questions? Or you can ask.
Yeah, find me, I'll be around.
Okay, as I said, I see you here at 4 o'clock sharp. Thank you.